and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review running books to help you decide if you would like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can keep you motivated about running or maybe inspire you to try something new. Today's book will be Runner, a short story about a long run by Lizzy Hawker, and your hosts are myself, my name is Elizabeth Macrusa, and my buddy Alan, also my training partner with the Phoenix team. So this book is a memoir about how Lizzy accidentally discovered ultra trail running and her journey of self-discovery through testing her limits through running. And we actually have a little bit of a different opinion on this book. So this will be a good conversation towards the end about what our thoughts are. The author of the book, so Lizzy, is actually quite an accomplished woman. I actually didn't know anything about Lizzy Hawker, and this book was, I read it after Alan had read it. So I'm not sure how you discovered this book. Do you remember, Alan?
I can't really remember how I discovered the book. Remember perhaps reading a snippet of it from somewhere and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting. And I didn't really know anything about Lizzy before I read it. I kind of fell in love a little bit with the way she was talking in the book. It spoke to me on an emotional level, I suppose, rather than a technical level. You know, we read technical books and go, oh, this is good. We're going to be super runners once we've read this and done some of this stuff. This was more like, oh, I want to go and run. Like, I'm reading this, I want to go. And at the time, I was just getting into trail running. And so Lizzy was speaking to my newfound love for getting out into the mountains or the hills and running the trails. Really excited to talk a little bit about this book. I probably kick off the intro in terms of talking a little bit about Lizzy Hawker, because I actually met her when we were a friend Guillaume and we went to run the Manaslu trail race, which is in Nepal in the Himalayan mountains. It's 8 or 9 days.
But you guys were
crazy
there.
Event.
Yeah, you guys were there. Didn't you leave for like 3 weeks?
Yeah, because we had to go and get acclimatized. So we had no altitude because we live at sea level. We figured we'd need to go and get acclimatized, and it takes you a few days to get there and back. So we were over there for about a 3-week stint, 10 days of which were in Kathmandu and running the Manaslu Trail. And there I met Lizzy Hawker, who by then I was kind of a groupie. It was like, oh, I'm going to meet Lizzy Hawker. Oh, wow, I read her book. I loved her book. She's an incredible athlete. It'll be like, meeting one of your heroes.
Like if I got to meet Kara Goucher. Basically.
Like if you got to meet Kara Goucher, which I'm sure you'll be doing soon. But, I was quite nervous. And Lizzy was just a bit of background. Lizzy was actually in Kathmandu, helping with the assistant at the organization for the Manaslu Trail Race with a good friend of hers, Richard Bull, who organizes the race. And then they go to Europe after that to organize the Tour de Monte Rosa, which is a European trail race, which Lizzy is actually the head of, and she organizes.
Wow.
So
That's pretty amazing.
She was there, and as a person, and I said, wow, it's really nice to meet you, and I've read your book, and would it be okay if I took a selfie with you, doing all the groupie stuff. But surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, because super trail runners are often shy geeks, I think. She was quite an unassuming person, sort of shy, a little bit introverted, sitting quietly, calmly, just doing her work. And in fact, I said to some people who we were meeting to get ready to run this trail race, oh, do you know who that is over there? And they say, oh yeah, that's Lizzy Hawker. She's helping to organize the race. I says, no, that's not Lizzy Hawker helping to organize the race. That's Lizzy Hawker, 5 times winner of the UTMB the most prestigious trail race in Europe.
Yeah, which the
And
UTMB, like I've only learned about it, I would say, in the last couple of years, but in the book, I think they mentioned it started in, was it 2003, the UTMB, the first year, or
yeah, and like
2005?
unlike any other race to begin with, you could just send in your entry and you'd get accepted, and then you go and run and see how you went. And it very quickly became so popular that now you have to qualify, and your chances of getting in, are subject to a lottery. You might have. I know I applied last year to get into the OCC, and my chances were about 1 in 4. I think the big UTMB, the 160K race, your chances are about 1 in 2. But
Oh, wow.
still, I think if you say a Western States, there's a trail race in North America, everybody go, yeah, it's super prestigious and you've got to be
Hmm.
good and you have to get in through a lottery and it takes ages. And now it's UTMB, the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc in France, Switzerland, based in Chamonix, which
And
is the
it's
equivalent
pretty,
European thing.
yeah, it's pretty impressive too, because I mean, Lizzie won it 5 times, and it's not a short race. It's like the UTMB is what, 170 kilometers. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
usually
it's.
some years it's been foreshortened because of bad weather, but the standard route is about 160, 170 kilometers.
And then what are the chances of having bad weather? Because I feel like every time I've seen the UTMB online, they've been running through like hail and snow and
Yeah,
rain,
I think the
and the
chances are
runners are
pretty good
freezing.
because it
Okay.
goes through some pretty high mountain passes. So some sections are often traditionally quite bad. So I think the chances of getting good weather are probably less. But some years it's so bad they actually change the route just to be
Oh,
safe.
wow. Wow. So, along with that, winning the UTMB 5 times, she's also accomplished a few other things, and these were in the book. So, out of the book, I got she was the 100-kilometer women's champion in, I believe it's 2006.
Yes.
And then the 24-hour record on the road. I don't know if that's still valid today, but she had the 24-hour record.
Yeah, I don't think they talk much about road records these days, but she did, I think it was 247K on the road. The overall record was just broken by Camille Herron, but that was on the track. That was 262K in 2018.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. So they run that on the track, on the 400-meter track, and they
yeah, I
just go
think so.
around.
I
Oh,
think so.
wow.
Yeah, you've got to be some sort of special Zen person, I think. And Lizzie was certainly that, and it was clear in her book that she has the mental strength and inclination towards these types of crazy challenges. Apart from those things, she's done all sorts of races, and I'll touch on a few things. Typically, I think she just throws herself to the next challenge and has constantly done that through her career. And she's more interested in the challenge than she is interested in necessarily, winning the same thing over and over again.
But
Um,
then she ends up winning also. So it's kind of interesting. She just kind of throws herself into it. Then it's like, oh my goodness, I won. Or that's sort of the impression I got in the first part of the book, like that she just kind of she was surprised at her results when she finished the UTMB the first time, let's say.
but very much so. I mean, the book sort of throws you in on the first page. She's some naive runner who's clearly a very good runner, but has decided to take on this challenge and has just gone to the UTMB and entered a 160-kilometer trail race, albeit she's trained, but she doesn't really know what to expect. And the book pitches you straight in, right on page 1, into this young girl with very uncertain expectations, starting at the beginning of some enormous challenge in terms of a race that's going to go through the night, through the mountains. She's really wondering about whether she's going to be able to complete the race. Um, they can have something like 40% dropouts in this race. So she's figuring about completing, and then gradually finds herself going from 30th position to 25 to more forward, but not really expecting that she's going to win. And is almost surprised at the end when she ends up winning. Never had the intention to do that, really went in for a challenge. And at the end of it, finds herself as the champion of one of the most prestigious trail races in the world. And doesn't really know what to make of that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I
And sort of
got.
she pitches us into that, and then while she's running the race, she in the first section, which she calls a journey of discovery, first few chapters, she's discovering the fact that she has this ability.
Mm-hmm.
But also while she's talking us through her first UTMB, she then takes us out of that and talks a bit through her history and her background. The fact that she was a child, she's an English lady by birth. She was born and raised in Upminster, which was a town in the south of England, and she was involved in she was a graduate in ecological sciences, and she went on expeditions to Antarctica for her job.
Yeah, and I read
So
one of her accomplishments was she was 2013 National Geographic Adventurer of the Year. So it's even before
yeah,
running.
yeah. So she's into challenge. She's mentally into challenge rather than,
Mm-hmm.
and I think just happened to find that she had a skill that she wasn't aware of for running, and it fitted with her mentality. So she takes us through that. So I was sort of captivated by that, and I think if you're reading the book for a sort of linear type continuation, it doesn't really work like that. It's more her headspace, and then she'll visit several places and give you several pieces of information. So it's more of a book that you would read for the feel of it, for the spirit
Mm-hmm.
of it,
Yeah.
rather than the technical nature of it.
Yeah, and I kind of liked that. Like I kind of liked to have those. It was almost like like in if you were watching it on a show, it would be sort of like little flashbacks, and it was almost like the same thing. So you're reading about her sort of discovering that she's good at this long distance running thing, and then you'll have little snippets of her past, which was kind of cool because it's sort of like her whole story. It's not just her story of being a runner. It's like her story of about who she is. And
Yeah, it's a little bit
yeah.
of biography, but most of her experiences is around
Mm-hmm.
her running exploits, and up until about 2015, that's when the book goes to it kind of cuts there. And I believe she's going to have another book coming out, but we'll talk about that when it comes out. So yeah, in the first section, you get to know her character a little bit. She goes off and climbs the Matterhorn, for example. She's on an Antarctic expedition. After she wins UTMB, she gets into the 100K World Championship team for Great Britain. She goes off and runs for suddenly she's a girl who's interested in trying to get involved in running. Suddenly she's running
Mm-hmm.
for her country in world championships,
I know
and
it's
she describes her surprise and total innocence of being drug tested at the end of the world championships. You never knew these things existed, and
mm-hmm.
it's like refreshingly naive, or at least it is for me. I mean, that's
Yeah.
I find it like that, very unpretentious,
Mm-hmm.
um, very innocent in the nice phrase of the nice sort of
And it sounds like
term.
it was confirmed like when you met her in person because it was, most people didn't even know who she was,
Yeah, very much
and
so.
she was, kind of, just letting everybody else have their experience and not kind of uh taking taking up all the space sort of thing, and very humble, even though she's accomplished, I mean, just these incredible things.
Yeah, and after all of that stuff, she keeps doing UTMB, and she keeps winning. I think she comes
Mm-hmm.
second one year, but she racks up 5 wins altogether. And in section 2, she starts to get a fascination for going to Nepal and visiting, perhaps the being interested in running in the high mountains, whereas she's experienced the Alps.
Yeah, which
It's
is the journey of exploration. And
it's
this is
it's a little bit like and why I was fascinated by it is a little bit like, I guess, my own or a mega version of my own little experience, where I went off to run in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, and thought, oh wow, I never thought I would do this. That's fantastic. And then you do that a couple of times and you go, so I've run in the Alps, I've run in the Rocky Mountains. What should we do next? Maybe we'll go to Nepal and run in the Himalayas. That would be fun. And you see her doing exactly that, but on a much bigger scale. And having experienced that myself, sort of living vicariously through her exploits in the book.
Yeah, and I guess you can sort of, I mean, you can relate to it because it's sort of the same path that you took. Whereas for me, I mean, these distances, they're just, I can barely wrap my head around those distances. I mean, like, I'm totally a pure road runner and have never run anything, well, with the exception of one race. I have not run anything longer than a marathon, and I'm all about the speed and this whole trail runner.
Yeah, we'll get you out of this as you get more mature, Liz. But you have to realize that it's not about a race. It's a race, but it's not about a race. It's about an experience.
But then maybe they shouldn't call it a race. They should call it an experience, because my brain hears race and I just need to find a way to race. And then
it's a race second, let's say. It's an experience first. And really, that's what Lizzy kind of touches on that with respect to the second part of her book, which she calls A Journey of Exploration, where she becomes fascinated with the idea of a new challenge and a new experience. And because she's an elite athlete, rather than just go to the Himalayas and run around and go, ooh, I'm in the Himalayas, she becomes sort of lured by the idea of her fastest known time from Everest Basecamp to Kathmandu.
Yes, and she does this
sort of an going beyond the extreme challenges. Yeah, it is a race. Well, it's a speed event. She's trying to cover it, but she's doing it on her own. It's not an organized. It's not an organized event.
But she does it 3 times. I mean, she doesn't do it once, and it's 320 kilometers, and she does it 3 times.
Yes, she does. And it takes her 75 hours the first time, and eventually, several years later, when she does the final one, she gets it down to 63 hours. But to go from Everest Basecamp to Kathmandu, the trouble is, if you're reading the book and you haven't been there, or you haven't experienced those kind of things, it's a little bit like having children. I can describe it to you, but until you have your own, you won't really know what I'm talking about. You won't know. I mean, it's the oxygen is so thin there, and the terrain's so tough, and it's so hard to move. When we went out there, we did a little section of the base camp trail to acclimatize, the sort of lower end, and we flew in to the airport there, the little airport at Lukla Airport, quite an experience, and we hiked up to one of the villages, Namche Bazaar, and then tried to do some running. We could hardly move when we first got there because of not being able to breathe very well. And we were nowhere near the base camp and the height of the base camp to actually go there and then run back. And instead of running back to the airport, to run all the way back to Kathmandu, it's difficult to imagine. I guess it's downhill. That's the only thing you could say about it. It's downhill.
Well, that's positive. Downhill makes it a little easier.
I mean, just to get to the start at Everest Basecamp, you've got to fly in, and then you've got like 6 or 7 days hike for a normal human being.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, we hiked for 2 days. We got about a third of the way, so it seems about right. But she did that with a 2-day hike up to 5,300 meters altitude at the base camp, and then arrived. You must be completely exhausted. And then she basically turned around and started running back, and then she ran for 75 hours.
Wow.
So it's a little bit bonkers, the challenge, and I think you don't get a feel for just how amazing that is, because Lizzy, what she describes it to you, she's a little bit in her headspace as well. She's talking about the beauty of it and the spiritual nature of it, which is all true, and the isolation and how zen that is. But also, it's a bonkers challenge,
Yeah.
and then to run constantly, it's just amazing.
Yeah. So
To want to
I,
do it again and a third time.
I remember, I think like this is one of the sections of the book that you kind of marvel at. And for me, I really had a hard time. I think I kind of lost focus in this section of the book, and I think I had to reread a few parts because I would be reading, and because there were all these names of villages that I didn't know and that I couldn't imagine. It was sort of like just reading, almost like reading another language. So it was interesting because for you it was just super inspirational because of what she did, but the way she described it, like for you, it spoke to you, or it sounds like it did. But
Yeah, I guess I was able to. It wasn't really when I was reading the book for the first time, but when I read the book afterwards, having been in the area, I was able to actually see some of the towns because I'd been there, or if I hadn't been there, I'd been to enough places that I knew what they looked like and knew what they felt like, and I could see, had a complete mental picture of what it would look like. Which, yeah, if you don't have that, you're just reading words, and the words are a bit foreign, and you don't really know what it means. So it's a good reason why you should listen to this podcast so that I can describe it to you guys. And now you can go and read it again with a different view. While she's doing these attempts at Everest, in between those attempts, well, not attempts, I guess they're successful descents from Everest Basecamp to Kathmandu, 320k. But in between the years, she's in her heyday in terms of performance. But in many ways, a lot of the super performance in terms of the athletic victories and things, she almost just dismisses them. Not really dismisses them, but just mentions them and just moves on. Because, as she says in the book, she becomes more obsessed with the challenge rather than the victories. It took me a while, but I managed to tease out reading her book that she won. What was it? She won the UTMB in 2012. It was a bit foreshortened. It was only 110 kilometers instead of 160, but she won. She came first. She also won a 100-mile race in Colorado. That's another 160k race. And then she also came first in the Spartathlon in Greece. First lady. She was third overall. That's 246 kilometers. And you go, wow, what an achievement for 1 year's worth of performance.
Yeah.
But actually, when you read it, they were all in the same month.
Oh my goodness. That's
It's
I mean,
and you don't even see, if I did that, I would write 2 books about it, just about that. and wouldn't you be justified? It just sort of happens bypassed in the book because she's so unassuming, and she's more focused on the challenge and the experience.
and it shows, it shows,
And I love that.
Yeah, it's kind of nice because it's sort of like she's kind of, it's almost like a childhood love kind
Exactly
of
that.
thing
Exactly
almost.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a when I talked about innocence earlier, it's a childlike innocence in terms of a love for something, just
Mm-hmm.
a pure love. And that's fantastic. I love running in trails and mountains, and that's what I feel when I do that. And so when somebody writes about it and I go, that's it, that's what she's saying, that's the stuff, that's
Ah,
the, that's the that's the secret sauce of trail running.
so that's why I think the book seemed you seem to be so, you passed me, I borrowed the book from you, and I remember you being just so enthusiastic about it, and be like I wanted to love this book because you had enjoyed it so much. And yeah, it's yeah, it just seemed like it really spoke to you. It seemed like it brought you, I don't know, maybe some good
Yeah, and I think just talking
thoughts.
with you now, we're touching on the reason why, and that's
Hmm.
kind of cool. And I'm feeling a little bit tingly now just talking about it, which is pretty cool. We should talk more about these things.
I guess we should read more trail books, I'm
There you
thinking.
go. Yeah, and if you don't feel it, that's okay, young Padawan. You have many years to develop your experience.
Well, I did my first trail experience, so maybe with some further trail experience, I can reread the book and have a better
I
appreciation
think when we were
for what it
running in
says.
the Selkirk Mountains in Revelstoke last year, I
Hmm.
think you saw with your partner Andre and myself, you saw what it is that kind of gets us going when we get into the trails there.
Yeah, it's very different, and I found mentally the training for it was hard, but once we got there and the whole experience and the uh, and you it was a little bit like Lizzy Hawker, because you meet these people, and I know, like Andre, my partner is just very social, so he talked to everybody, and he was like, oh, did you know this person was an elite, I don't know, skier, or went to qualified for the Olympics in this other sport, and so there were these people there that were not necessarily from a running background, but they were very good trail runners,
They were
and
adventurers, probably.
and yeah, and they were all there, and just everybody was just very nice, and it felt like a
Yeah,
big community, and
yeah. And in fact, it's a small community to
or a
some
small
extent.
community, I
But
guess.
shout out to the Trans-Selkirk's trail run that happens every year, 5 days in the Selkirk Mountains out of Revelstoke. Great event. Still in its growth phase. Get in now while you can get in easily. Superb. Anyway, back to us. I know your holy grail at the moment is the 3-hour marathon.
Yes.
So one thing at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. I have tunnel vision when I have a
Yeah,
goal.
yeah. We'll talk.
So
No doubt we'll talk about that more as we get onto more books. Um, so, Lizzy does all these fantastic things, and you get to live vicariously through her love and pure enjoyment of the challenge of those things.
mhm.
And then we come on to section 3, which she has a name for. She calls it a journey of rediscovery and realization, where she starts to get injured. So, instead of the book finishing in a tumultuous sort of victory, it kind of finishes with a section where she's injured and she's trying to get ready to do events, and then she gets injured again. She ends up with a whole series of stress fractures and not being able to, and having to pull out of events and not being able to enter events, and really asking herself, well, if I'm a runner and now I can't run because I keep getting injured, I don't know how many stress fractures she has. She has at least 4.
At least
Um,
4. Yeah.
yeah, I was trying to count them in the book, but it's hard to follow. But at least 4 stress fractures. And she ends up sort of really asking herself, if she's a runner and she can't run, then who is she? Who is
Mm-hmm.
she now that she's done all this running and now she can't do anything? But rather than just sort of leave it there, she tries to answer that question. So it becomes sort of a little bit Zen in terms of, living with her injuries and how she copes with that, going from, enormous mileage to nothing, and then
Mm-hmm.
doing other things, becoming a yoga teacher, trying to respect failures, trying to learn lessons through the experience of being injured rather than learn lessons through the experience of overcoming challenges.
And she doesn't give up hope either, because every time, a stress fracture, she's basically complete rest for, weeks on end. She
Yeah.
loses all her fitness, and then she'll recover and she tries again. So I found that was really it really shows her character's strength, because she doesn't do it once. I mean, 4 stress fractures, so she really, she really goes from being super fit and doing all these things that are so, hard to even think of, let alone do, and then she goes to being completely, after having rested and being completely detrained and unfit, and then she'll get back into it, which is
And then get injured again,
and
and
then
then
get
you and
injured
then
again.
and then you think, oh my God, I'd be a complete wreck. But
Mm-hmm.
she then views that as another type of challenge, and she goes deep inside of herself and she's looking for, ways to cope and new things to learn from those experiences.
Mm-hmm. Which is actually, I mean, it's such a great way to look at it. And but it's so hard, because I mean, like, I had plantar fasciitis and I thought it was the end of the world
Yeah,
because I could only run.
you were kind of out for a year, really, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. But even it wasn't even at all like her experience, because she
No.
couldn't run at all because she had a stress fracture, whereas I was able to run, but I was just running very, very little. But I could at least, like, go out and have some fresh air and put on running shoes, which I think is part of what keeps you sane as an injured runner, even if you're used to running every day and then you end up only running every second day. It's still that little routine, that little bit of normalcy. But she loses it all, and she
Yeah.
loses it all every time she gets back into shape and she's training for another event, and then right before the event she has to pull out.
Yeah, I mean, as a last word, there's a little poem that she writes at the start of the last chapter, and she writes references to everything in the book, where she gets her quotes from and things like that, except she doesn't write a reference to this. And I can't find a reference to this. So I suspect maybe she wrote it herself, but I don't know for sure. And it speaks to me, and I might just read the poem just to sort of close my spiel, and we can talk about the book itself. It's called Lines. And if anybody knows where it comes from, or if Lizzie's listening and she can confirm that it's hers, I'd like to know. The lines that we cross and the lines that we don't cross. The start line and the race that we didn't plan to run. The finish line that we never thought we'd reach. The red line that we almost came too close to. The fine line between doing too much and not enough. The line that dangles us precariously somewhere between injury and being in the form of our life. The line that marks the boundary of what we thought was possible. The line that signifies the edge we are pushing towards. The line that is our sutra, the thread that pulls all the terrifyingly beautiful, disparate parts of our life together and takes us right back to where we started.
Hmm.
Isn't that nice?
It is nice. Yeah. I had a small, like, this I've picked out one small quote which seemed to sort of sum up her journey of self-discovery. So she says at the end of the book, to be running is enough, because if I'm running, then I'm alive, and to be alive is everything. And so it feels like the end of the book, it sort of gave it closure, because, in the middle of the book, she was asking herself, on her third attempt of the Everest Basecamp to Kathmandu, she's saying, she says, that it's trying to tease out the why of doing something like that. And so she basically did the third attempt, not because she was trying to break her own record again, but because she wanted to try and figure out why she does it, which is really, a very long way to run, to try and figure out why you run that distance. And I feel like that closing sort of sentence just seems like it just seemed like it gave everything. She just finds meaning in just running. She does it because I guess she just likes to run, sort of makes her feel alive.
And probably every ultra runner will identify strongly with that.
I think so. I think most runners will as well. I mean, that sort of ending spoke to me, even if some of the middle part didn't.
Well, it's a good opportunity at the end to talk about that. What do we think about the book?
So I think, the first thing, what kind of book is it? I mean, we sort of already mentioned that it's more of an autobiography. It's her personal journey and growth through running. I guess it could be an inspirational type of book. It's more like
Inspirational rather than, it
rather
doesn't give
than
you
information.
motivational or informational push, but it gives you some inspiration if you identify with it.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, I guess my
You say the
opinion.
middle section didn't work for you. You've
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah, I found the middle section to sort of not speak to me so much, and so that was,
I would say as well, if you're looking for coherency in terms of here's an event and then it leads to this next event and then it leads to this next event and then it leads to this next event, like chronological coherency and stuff like that, it's probably not a good book for that. But if you're looking for something that gives you some inspiration and you can align with where she's coming from, then it's a fantastic book for that.
Or like in your case, I found that, well, it seems like it gave you a lot of motivation, because you then decided to go and do this 3-week trip to Nepal, where you were running in those same places. So
Yeah, and if you're into that stuff and you have that mentality, it's a fantastic inspirational book. A feel good. I was getting goosebumps just talking to you about it, basically.
So, I mean, I did get some positive out of the book.
Training programs don't give me goosebumps.
I very much enjoy reading about training programs, but I understand that, that there's got to be books for everybody, and we're not all the same. So,
Sure. Okay.
I think you can still get something positive out of every book. So I did get something out of this book. I could pretty much, every runner can identify with her thought process during her injuries. And, I did find that it was pretty inspiring to see that she just, got back up on the horse after. And I found that, I enjoyed the first part as well, where she sort of accidentally discovers her talent as a long distance runner, because I feel like it's sort of proof that we don't know what we're capable of until we try. And I think sometimes we put limits on ourselves before we even.
We don't even try because we think it's not possible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, not it's a bit of a common theme. You hear runners say this all the time, like they like, oh, I can't run that fast. Well, like, you can't run that fast today, but if you tried, maybe you could. And so I feel like, like, she just kind of didn't really think anything of it. She just jumped in there and tried, and just accidentally found out that she was good at this long distance trail running thing. So I really like that.
Makes you wonder maybe how many super champions there are who've never really discovered their real skill because it's been
Mm-hmm.
lying dormant and they haven't activated it.
Yeah, because they didn't try. In terms of who I think would like this book, I think it probably speaks more to trail runners. But it's a good story. She does tell a good story. I would say that it does flow pretty well. Like the writing's pretty good. So readability rating, I would give that a 5 stars for sure. I liked the sort of like, it's not chronological, but you do um, get these little insights. It's true that you don't always know what happened first and second. Sometimes you have to think about it a little bit, but it reads really well. And overall, though, I'm giving it 3 stars just because of the fact that for myself, not really being much of a trail runner,
Middle
I
section, which is quite a big
the
section, is kind of boring for you.
yeah, it's a third of the book, and
Yeah.
so I had a hard time with that. But I think you probably give it a different rating.
Yeah, I guess if you're looking for a technical book or a how-to book or some tips, this is not the book for you. So it's not that kind of book, and it doesn't pretend to be that kind of book. So the rating doesn't revolve around that. So if you're looking for an inspirational book, and as you say, you're into the mentality of the challenge, and you like wild places, yeah, I think this is definitely the book for you. You shouldn't miss this one. Go out and get it now, quick, before it sells out. I'll give it 5.2 out of 5. I think when you get something where you get an emotional response to it, I think it's always a good sign. I'm putting it right up there.
That's fair. That's fair. So,
Just above 5 out of 5. What can I say? I loved it. So that would be my rating.
Okay, well that sounds good. I mean, we don't have to always agree on everything, so this is one of those times when we don't, which is perfectly fine. And so that would be probably about all I had to say as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, after that, though, I guess our listeners can decide for themselves. They
Mm-hmm.
can say, "Well, I've heard enough," or "That's convinced me that I should go and read that book," or "Now I know it's not the kind of book that I want." So I think
Yeah,
that's useful.
so we hope that at least we were able to help everybody decide if the book is for them. If you've never heard of Lizzy Hawker, maybe this podcast has added an extra book to your reading list. We do have a running book reviews page on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram, so you can follow us and give us feedback on maybe other books that you'd like us to read in the future, or things that you think that we can improve on.
That would be great. Until then, happy reading.